It sounds like the plot of a horror movie. Secret laboratories, government agents, citizens drugged without their knowledge, experiments that blurred the line between science and torture. But this wasn't fiction. This was real. From the early 1950s through the 1970s. The Central Intelligence Agency carried out one of the most chilling programs in American history. Its name was MK Ultra, a top-secret project designed to explore mind control. The goal: to unlock the human brain, to bend thought and break will, to weaponize the very essence of consciousness. The Cold War fueled it all. The US was terrified that the Soviet Union and China were experimenting with brainwashing techniques. American spies, prisoners of war, even civilians might be vulnerable to psychological manipulation. So the CIA decided to get there first, at any cost. The methods were shocking. Prisoners, mental patients, soldiers, and unsuspecting civilians were dosed with LSD and other hallucinogens. Some were hypnotized. Others were subjected to sensory deprivation, electric shocks, and psychological torment. Many never gave consent. Some never even knew they were part of an experiment. And some never survived. The program was hidden behind layers of secrecy. Hospitals, universities, even brothels were used as fronts. Men in suits watched from behind two-way mirrors as subjects lost grip on reality, stumbling through drug-induced hallucinations. What they called research was, in truth, psychological horror inflicted on real people. For decades, the public knew nothing, but whispers spread. Strange suicides, families torn apart, victims who remembered fragments, bright lights, injections, voices commanding them to obey. It wasn't until the 1970s, when congressional investigations finally dragged MK Ultra into the light, that America learned the horrifying truth. Thousands of documents had been destroyed, but enough survived to reveal the scope. More than 80 institutions and 150 separate experiments. The CIA had turned its own citizens into guinea pigs in a quest for control. The scars remain. Victims who lost decades of their lives to trauma. Families who still demand answers. And a nation left to wonder, how far will a government go in the name of security? MK Ultra isn't just history. It's a ghost story. One that still haunts America today, because when the people sworn to protect you are the ones experimenting on your mind, who can you ever truly trust? The story of MK Ultra begins in the shadow of World War II. As Nazi Germany collapsed, American and Soviet forces raced to capture not just territory, but knowledge. Scientists who had worked on horrific experiments in concentration camps were suddenly valuable prizes in a new kind of war, the Cold War, through Operation Paperclip. Many of these men were brought to the United States. They carried with them research on torture, drugs, and human endurance. To the CIA, desperate to outpace the Soviets, morality mattered less than results. In 1953, under the leadership of CIA Director Allen Dulles, MK Ultra was officially launched. The mission was clear but chilling: explore the limits of the human mind. Could thoughts be controlled? Could memories be erased? Could a man be broken down and rebuilt as an obedient pawn? It wasn't just about science. It was about power. Whoever controlled the mind could control the future. And so, in secret, the CIA set out to rewrite human consciousness itself. MKultra was not one experiment. It was hundreds, conducted in universities, hospitals, prisons, and even brothels. Its methods ranged from bizarre to outright sadistic. The most infamous tool was LSD. Subjects were dosed with the powerful hallucinogen, sometimes voluntarily, often not. CIA operatives slipped it into drinks at parties, gave it to soldiers without warning, and even exposed their own agents just to observe the results. Men and women spiraled into terrifying hallucinations, paranoia, and psychotic breaks. But LSD was only the beginning. Victims were subjected to hypnosis, used to implant suggestions or erase memories. Electroconvulsive therapy at shockingly high voltages. Sensory deprivation, leaving people in complete silence and darkness for days. Sleep deprivation, keeping subjects awake for a week at a time. Drug cocktails, mixing barbiturates and stimulants to confuse the brain. Some experiments were designed to simulate torture. Others sought to see if programmed assassins could be created, humans who would kill on command, without memory of the act. There were no safeguards, no oversight, and no limits. Perhaps the most horrifying part of MKultra was not the methods, but the victims. Prisoners were promised lighter sentences if they volunteered only to endure weeks of drug-induced torment. Psychiatric patients, already vulnerable, were used as test subjects without their knowledge. College students were offered money to take part in studies, but were never told what they were really part of. Even ordinary citizens became victims. In San Francisco and in New York, the CIA ran safe houses where sex workers, secretly working with the agency, lured men inside. Drinks were laced with LSD while agents watched behind hidden mirrors. They called it Operation Midnight Climax. Be a cruel game where the test subjects had no idea their minds were being stolen. Some victims never recovered. Hallucinations lingered for years. Families broke apart under the weight of trauma. At least one man, a scientist named Frank Olson, plunged to his death from a New York hotel window after being secretly dosed with LSD by his CIA colleagues. Officially ruled a suicide, his death remained shrouded in mystery and suspicion. M didn't just study the human mind, it shattered it. In the mid-1950s, the CIA created one of the most bizarre and disturbing sub-projects of MKultra, Operation Midnight Climax. The plan was simple and horrifying. The CIA set up safe houses in San Francisco and New York, decorating them like ordinary apartments. Behind the walls, however, were microphones, cameras, and two-way mirrors. Sex workers were secretly recruited by the agency. Their assignment: bring unsuspecting men back to the safe houses. Once inside, the men's drinks would be laced with LSD, as they slipped into hallucinatory states. CIA agents watched from behind the glass, taking notes on their reactions. The safe houses weren't just laboratories, they were playgrounds for power. Agents sometimes joined in the experiments, using the chaos as an excuse for debauchery. The line between science and sadism blurred completely. For the men caught in this web, there was no consent, no understanding. They were human lab rats, used for experiments they never volunteered for, and discarded when the night ended. One of the most infamous tragedies of M-Culture was the death of Frank Olson, a scientist working with the CA. In 1953, Olson attended by a retreat with colleagues. Without his knowledge, he was secretly dosed with LSD. In the days that followed, he became paranoid, withdrawn, and increasingly unstable. His family later recalled he seemed terrified, as if he had seen something he could not forget. A week later, Olson plunged from the 13th floor of the Hotel Statler in New York City. The official report called it a suicide, but the details were murky. He had expressed doubts about his work with the CIA, including biological warfare experiments. Some believe he was murdered to silence him. For decades, his death remained shrouded in secrecy. Only in the 1970s did his family learn the truth. Olson had been a victim of M-Culture. To this day, his death is a symbol of how far the government was willing to go, and how little regard it had for the lives caught in its experiments. As M-Culture grew, so did its reach. More than 80 institutions became involved: universities, hospitals, prisons, and private companies. Some professors and doctors knew what they were doing. Others had no idea their research was being funneled into the CIA's web of control. Experiments multiplied. Children were reportedly used in some studies, their developing minds subjected to hypnosis and drugs. Psychiatric patients endured endless tests under the guise of treatment. Even within the CIA, some operatives were given LSD without warning, sending them into terrifying psychotic episodes. The project had no clear boundaries, no moral compass. It was fueled by fear. Fear of the Soviets. Fear of losing the Cold War. Fear that if America didn't master mind control, someone else would. But in the process, M-Culture became something far darker than science. It became a nightmare that consumed lives, destroyed families, and left a legacy of mistrust that still haunts America today. By the late 1960s, M-Culture had grown too large to stay hidden forever. Whispers spread among journalists, academics, and even members of Congress. Rumors of secret drug tests, broken lives, and unexplained deaths began surfacing in small reports. But the CIA dismissed it all as paranoia, and most Americans, already consumed by the Vietnam War, civil rights struggles, and political unrest, had no idea what was really happening in laboratories and safe houses across the country. The first cracks appeared when stories of LSD experiments leaked. College students described being paid to take part in scientific studies that left them hallucinating for days. Families told of loved ones whose mental health collapsed after mysterious treatments. The truth was inching closer to the surface, and when it came, it would shock the world. In the 1970s, the United States was rocked by a scandal. Watergate had destroyed public trust in government, and Americans demanded answers. In 1975, Senator Frank Church launched an investigation into the activities of the CIA, FBI, and NSA. It was during these hearings, known as the Church Committee, that MK Ultra was dragged into the light. Witnesses described shocking details, drugging unsuspecting citizens, torture disguised as research, and experiments that violated every ethical boundary imaginable. Senators listened in disbelief as they learned their own government had used its people as guinea pigs. One CIA officer admitted, "We were trying to control human behavior." The hearings horrified the nation. But the true scope of MK Ultra would never be fully known, because the CIA had already moved to cover its tracks. In 1973, as the Watergate scandal erupted, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered nearly all files related to MK Ultra destroyed. Truckloads of documents were shredded, erasing decades of evidence. What survived was only a fraction minus 20,000 documents accidentally misfiled in a budget office. These scraps gave investigators a glimpse into the horror, but not the full picture. How many victims were there? How many lives destroyed? How many experiments hidden forever? No one knows. The destruction of evidence ensured that the ghosts of MK Ultra would always outnumber the facts. For the victims, this meant no closure, no justice, no truth. Only fragments of horror pieced together from what little the CIA failed to burn. When MK Ultra was finally exposed, survivors began to tell their stories. They spoke of being lured into medical studies that left them broken, of doctors injecting them with drugs, strapping them to beds, and leaving them hallucinating for days, of memories wiped clean, never knowing what had happened. Families came forward. Wives described husbands who returned home paranoid, violent, or catatonic. Children remembered parents who never recovered from the shadows cast by the experiments. Some cases became infamous. A woman recalled being given LSD for 77 days straight. Prisoners testified they were used like lab animals, their bodies destroyed for data. And the family of Frank Olson, the scientist who plunged from a New York hotel window, demanded justice, claiming he had been murdered for what he knew. For every victim who spoke, countless others remained silent, lost in mental institutions, buried in unmarked graves, or too afraid to relive the nightmare. MK Ultra was more than an experiment. It was a betrayal. The program shattered trust in the government, in medicine, and in science itself. How could Americans believe in their institutions when those very institutions had used them as guinea pigs? Communities already suspicious of authority found their worst fears confirmed, and the effects linger even today. Conspiracies about secret experiments, hidden programs, and shadowy government control aren't just paranoia. They are rooted in the undeniable reality of MK Ultra. The CIA claimed the program ended in the 1970s. But the question remains, if they could do this once, what might they still be hiding? MKulture was born from fear. Fear of communism, fear of losing the Cold War, fear of falling behind. But in trying to conquer fear, the United States government created something far worse. A program that destroyed lives, erased memories, and left scars that will never heal. It turned citizens into lab rats. It turned science into torture. It turned trust into betrayal. And though decades have passed, the ghosts of MKulture are still with us. They live in the families who suffered. They live in the shattered lives of victims who never got answers. And they live in the unease that comes with knowing the truth, that the people sworn to protect us are capable of horrors we can barely imagine. So we must ask, what is more terrifying, the experiments we know about, or the ones still hidden? In the shadows, if this story shocked you, if it made you rethink the hidden corners of history, don't let it end here. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe MKulture really ended? Or do you think its spirit still lingers in secret programs today? Because in the end, MKulture isn't just history. It's a warning. A reminder that when power goes unchecked, the human mind itself can become the battlefield, and the ghosts of those experiments are still watching.